I'd like to move on to the next speaker of the day, and that is Dr. Madhav Chavan, founder and CEO of Pratham. He will give us his view of the magnitude of the problem that India faces in terms of primary education and how Pratham has gone about addressing this need. Obviously, we see a great amount of change in the future, and he is very interested in what Silicon Valley has to say and deliver in the area of innovative technology so that Pratham can improve and incorporate that in its mission for the next 20 years. By the way, Dr. Chavan is not only the head of this very prestigious organization in India, he is also the recipient of the Wise Prize for Education in 2012, which is the equivalent to the Nobel Prize of Education. Pratham has impacted more than 30 million children since its founding. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Madhav Chavan. Thank you.
Thank you. As Dr. Mitra was speaking, I was getting increasingly worried. And then I was a little happy. Worried because it seemed like with the philosophical framework of children teaching themselves, I was wondering where he was going to go and whether I should speak at all. And then he said he's not found the answer yet to how children can teach themselves reading. I said, wow, that's good. But I'm afraid he's going to find that answer soon. And then he did not list reading as one of the obsolete things yet. So I was, again, reassured that we are on the right track. We started working on education way back in 1994 when I switched from being a chemistry teacher to primary education. I had started working on adult literacy before that. And from 94 onwards, we've been working on this mission which says every child in school and learning well. We thought we knew the problem, that all the children are not in school. And we also had a sense of the problem that they are not learning well, and hence all children in school and learning well. I'll give you the punchline first. After working in this sector for 20 years, I'm asking my colleagues, and that's why I went to meet Sugata last year to Newcastle, after many years of watching him and listening to his talks and so on. Actually, we had never met, and I thought I should make the journey to meet him, and we made great friends, I think. Even before that, I was already reaching this conclusion that maybe the motto of Pratham should change to every child not in school, but learning well. Or maybe and learning well. Now, that's something that we have to play with. So today, this is going to be a completely non-technology talk. And towards the end, maybe we'll explore if there is something that technology can do to solve the bigger problem. And I'll come to that as I complete what is on the slides. So everybody had been talking about how poor the education, especially in the government schools, is. And now we know that it's not limited to only government schools or even elite private schools. I mean, it's going into the elite private schools as well, depending upon what you define as education. If you define schooling as education, which we now think is not true, schooling is not educations. Then how do you define the quality of education? You say that quality is poor. So way back in 2002, after noticing that children go to school but do not know basic reading, writing, arithmetic, we said, let's try to focus on one thing. Rather than trying to teach everything, can we teach children only reading? Let's forget about everything else. Can we just focus on one thing? And the method that came out is like the chaos method that you're talking about, which gives children exposure to a lot of things, a lot of activities, talking, listening to stories, trying to read, imitating reading, using the Bara Khadi chart and so on and so forth. And we found that children learn to read very quickly. It's not a linear method. It's not as you learn the alphabet first, then you learn to use the vowel signs, and then you go. It is a combination of many things together, which we developed over a period of years. But while we were teaching this, and Pratham tries to work on scale, the idea was not to test it out in a small pilot, but go to millions of children who could not read. So the important necessity at that time was that we should know how to test a child to ascertain the level at which the child is. So Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, who's sitting here next to Umang, devised this testing tool, which a lot of experts, and some of the problems of education, or most of the problems of education, are because of experts who know everything, everything in the frame that they are used to. But where we wanted to go was give ordinary, less educated people tools to test the children, ascertain their level, and teach them to read better or read at all. So this tool is a very simple tool, as you can see, and I suspect most of you know how to read Hindi. So I don't have to really explain. And those who don't know Hindi can actually also see how simple the tool is. Is there a pointer? No, there isn't. That's all right. Let me see if I can use it here. Okay. So this is, as you see, a grade 1 level text. So we start the test here and give the child this text to read to make the test shorter. If the child can read this well, now where did my pointer go? Here. If they can read this well, then you ask them to read this. This is a little more complicated, but only at the standard 2, grade 2 level. If they can read that, then you say, okay, you are a minimum fluent reader. And can read is without certain errors and so on, and if you can read it properly. But if you can't read this first grade text, then you go down and check whether the child can read words. And if they can, then say you are a word level child. And if you can't read the words, the child has a difficulty reading the words, then you go down and say, can you identify the alphabets? And if you can read those alphabets, 4 out of whatever, then you are an alphabet level child. You don't have to read all of them. The test is very short. And the whole test is over within less than 5 minutes, and it's done in households, it's done in communities. And Rukmini is better at telling stories about this, where you start testing in a village or in a community, and other kids figure it out, like very much like your experience. They say, oh, I know that kid is word level. No, that fellow doesn't really know anything. He's a nothing level child or whatever. So they actually know it very quickly. But the important thing is that this is done very simply, and everybody knows, okay, this is the problem, or at least this is the symptom of a problem. The problem may be bigger, but at least the symptom is there. It's like a thermometer, and you know that the child has temperature, and so something needs to be done. Once that is done, the question is, now what do you do? So we actually, the strategy that we have been following now, especially in the communities where we work. Let me go back. So this tool actually helped us create a whole annual survey across India, which we have been doing for the last 9 years. We've done 9 surveys, and these are huge surveys. The National Sample Survey of India does 6,000 villages per year, whereas the sample size of the annual status of education report is 16,000 villages, covering the entire country, all the states. And in those 16,000 villages, in every village, 20 households, 25 households are checked, 20 households. So you're looking at something like 330,000 households, and then 600,000 odd children are visited every year by 30,000 odd volunteers. These are all thousands numbers. It's a movement. Because of the simplicity of the tool, because it's a very ordinary tool to explain, once you've done it or practiced a couple of times, any ordinary person can actually test it. And it's very robust. It's been tested by many people, compared with other testing methodologies, and we find that this works. So the key to scaling up to us is to start with the mindset of a scale and not start with the mindset of a small thing to do. Say, how will I develop something that will go to scale? In which case, the simplicity of it is important, and hence the robustness also is also important. Can you do both things together? And this is what worked in this particular case, and we started testing around the country. The last, this is called ASAR. I know many people in the United States call it ASER. It's not ASER, especially for Indians. It's ASAR, as in impact. I'll forgive non-Indians for saying ASER, but I will never forget and forgive Indians who call it ASER anymore. Umang, remember that. So, well, there are others. I just picked him for representative. So, what do we find in this case? Now, you've seen the testing tool. Grade 3, 4, and 5. What you see, this is an all India average. So, the number of children who cannot even read letters is relatively small. It goes down as we go to grade 5. Now, this is not because of kids dropping out. They do get familiar with alphabets over a period of time. They are in the environment. So, as you know, self-learning does happen. So, something or the other is happening with the children. And at the other extreme, the story level, which is the second grade text reader, from 21% it goes up to about 47%. Right? The conclusion is by 5th grade, fluent readers of second grade level at least, some of these may be reading higher level as well, but we are looking only at the second grade fluency. You find that no more than 50%, this is a 47% number, no more than 47-50% children, average around India, can read a second grade text fluently, and the rest of them are even lower. You can see that 21% can read the first grade level, but not the second grade, and the remaining 40% are still below. Right? So, they are not going to be able to read reasonably their own textbooks. As Rukmini says, the textbook is somewhere here, it's loaded, where the reading level is here, and if the child cannot read what is in the textbooks, then you are not going to be able to navigate the curriculum beyond 5th grade. Now what is happening is we have the Right to Education Act, and since several years, a decade almost or more, in many states, the policy to promote children upwards into the next grade, regardless of their schooling or education, has been followed. This is because the one word that is stuck in the education establishment, two things. One is access. All children must be in school. We are guilty of that. Every child in school, remember? And nobody should drop out, mind you, because they should be in school. Because school is education. Wrong. School is schooling. And that's what we know, that what you are trying to do is keep them in that office environment that Shagato showed you, make sure you are in that school, and what you've achieved is 100% schooling. Have you achieved 100% learning? The answer is evident to you. And there are several problems. This is the first of the symptoms. Regimentation happens. Listen to me. Do not ask questions. You have to write down what I say. And the child automatically starts saying, teacher, please tell me the answer, because I don't know the answer. You are the one who's going to tell me the answer, and that's ingrained from the beginning. And that's what I think Shagato is challenging, that children can find their own answers as well, as long as they're exposed to the whole globe that they can move around. Anyways, so reading. So if this is the case, can you solve the problem? There is the next slide, which is something that is further scary. That the reading levels at the first grade, children who can at least identify letters, used to be at about 65% many years ago. And after 2010, you can see that it has been declining. This is when the Right to Education Act came into being. And the message, it seems, why is this happening? The message, it seems, is it's not anymore necessary to teach the child. Not that they have to learn themselves. I wish that was true. But you have to not necessarily focus on these things. and input-focused policies started taking root. That's the explanation we have. There could be other reasons as well. You can see that the reading level at the 5th grade also, now we have split this into children from government schools and private schools. You can see that the decline in the government schools is much more than the private school decline. There is a certain decline in the private schools. A large contribution for that, into that, comes from government-aided private schools, which actually acquire the character of a government school because of the various government controls. But by and large, the private school system has, it seems, has retained its, at least the reading level proficiency, not very high, but it's retained itself. That is not to say, I'm not saying the private schools are better. There are reasons why the private school performances look better, but they are not necessarily better in an absolute sort of way. The same thing you can see the trend for grade 1 children who can identify numbers. You can see that the ability to identify numbers is also going down. Now, another set of data for private schools, but I'll get out of this data and tell you what we are doing about this. Now, what you see here are the results of our new model of teaching children, of what we call the learning camps. First of all, the children are doing time, spending time in school, and during that time they're supposed to be in school and learning. What we find is to teach children learning to read. If you start with the baseline where the blue, the top dark blue, 4% are the children who can read 2nd grade. This is children in 3rd, 4th and 5th grade combined together. The baseline is saying 29% could not even identify alphabets, 36% could identify alphabets but not read words, and 23% more. So you're looking at something like 87% children who cannot even read a simple grade 1 text. If you have that sort of a baseline, how do you teach them reading and how long does it take? So what we do is a volunteer goes into a village, gathers a few other volunteers. The volunteer is a paid full-time person from Pratham in a remote location, as far as you can go, where he says, let's gather some young people, and they go around testing all the children in the village at home in front of the parents and say, would you like to enroll your child in the learning camp? Then there's a talk with the school. The school teacher often is more than happy to say, okay, take away 2 hours of the school if you're doing well, because the head of the village is also involved in saying, if this is the situation, then I want all the children to learn to read. So 2 hours of the school in the morning are dedicated to just learning basic reading and math. I'm not talking about math today, but it's similar. And then the children are grouped according to levels. So you can see that the readers, which is about 13% at the top, will be in one group, word level readers in one group, and so on. And these children, grouped into 3 or 4, are then taught according to their levels to move forward. Now, we are still refining that method as to what to do. You see, I told you that they are exposed to different kinds of stimuli. There's storytelling, there's chit-chat, talking about things, writing words, saying words, just getting the sense of what words are like and so on. And then children start progressing. The first end line is tested in just about, the camp lasts not more than 8 or 10 days. Okay, this one is 8 days. And at the end line, you find that already the number of children who do not know alphabets has dropped from 29% to 10%, and the children who can read has gone up. You see that 9% have probably moved up a notch higher. So most children make one level jump within that period of 7 or 8 days, and then you go away. This idea of going away that Shugato has been talking about seems to be fairly common among creative people. Good to go away. You go away, don't know what happens. In the meantime, the volunteers are given some reading material to give to the children and do something. When you come back after about 20 days, some children at the early reading stages have sort of dropped back, but they pick up within 2 days again, and another 8 days of a burst, and you find that now the end line is looking even better. There are 30% children who are reading at least at the second grade level, and so on. Go away for 20 days, come back again, and you find that at the end line 3, you have now more than 70% children, 71% children who are at least reading grade 1 or grade 2 level, and there are still some remaining. So now we are looking at why not go beyond the third. It's predictable that those 12 plus 15%, 27% who are sitting there who are not readers yet, they can be converted to readers and fluent readers within 2 more camps. So if you say 8 days a camp, roughly, then you should be looking at about 40 to 50 days maximum to get the entire lot becoming fluent readers. And this is not just reading. The 2-hour period is split between half time between the reading exercises and half time mathematics. At the same time, they're learning numbers and operations and so on. What does that tell you? And these are the children, many of whom have spent 5 years, 4 years in school, 4 years in school, 3 years in school, and all it takes is an intervention, a focused intervention, playful, joyful intervention. We call it the learning camp, for 2 hours a day, and children flock to the camp. They want to be a part of it. They enjoy it. And they are ready to learn in 50 days. So if it takes 100 children to learn to read in 50 days, how long should it take 100 million children to learn?
50 days.
Well, if the government agrees that this is a good method, if the teachers agree that this is how they want to teach, if all the adults get out of the way of the children, then 50 days. The biggest problem is getting them out of the way. Now, what we did was, what we've been doing is, this is not just for our sake. This actually happens in about 15,000 schools. What we do this to demonstrate to the government policymakers and implementers so that they can actually adopt these methods. They don't have to necessarily do the learning camps. But when we went to schools and governments adopted these practices of how to teach, group the children, test the children, group the children, teach them according to their levels, and let them progress, you find the results are replicated in government schools as well, or in private schools for that matter. So this is essentially what I wanted to talk about. But let me end by saying, I think the conclusions are very simple. And this is why I went to meet Dr. Mitra. That schooling, I thought I knew the problem, that children are not reading. Children are not reading is not the problem. That's the symptom of the problem. The problem is the way the school is organized. What it is doing is actually regimenting. It is a system which is created as a replica of what we thought was the Industrial Revolution. And now we know that the whole world has become random in its operation. Random not in chaotic sense. It is actually chaotic, looking at the systems are not quite linear. There's a non-linear world. And our schools are still very, very linear. And they are based on the authority of the teacher, and the teacher saying, I'll tell you what. And the teacher gets her authority from the curriculum, which is again coming from the state government. I think this needs to change. So ultimately, it's a matter of saying, how do we reform the whole system? This is one way of doing things, and these problems now, later on, reflect into the secondary schooling and all that. I don't think I have the time to talk about it now, but the solution lies not inside the school the way it is organized today. The more we try to do with the school, the less success we are going to meet, is the feeling that I'm getting. Thank you very much.